Today, we're diving into the story of a true rock and roll visionary. I'm talking about a guy whose voice could literally tear a hole in the sky. This is the incredible, tragic story of Roky Erickson. And get this, before Hendrix, before the Doors even really broke big, there was Roky Erickson and his band, the 13th Floor Elevators. And they weren't just playing music, they were inventing a whole new genre from scratch. I mean, they were truly at the absolute forefront of a sonic revolution. Which leads to the tragic question at the very heart of his story. How on earth does a musical genius, someone who was actively changing the world, get so completely broken by the very systems that were supposed to help? It's just devastating. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in mid-1960s Austin, Texas. Rock and roll is exploding everywhere, right? But Roky Erickson, he was about to light the fuse on something completely and totally new. And you really have to get this about the band's whole mission. They weren't just trying to play loud, rebellious music. No, they were the ones who actually coined the term psychedelic rock. Why? Because they genuinely believed their songs were a sonic key, to unlock the mind. So what was their secret sauce? I mean, their formula was just revolutionary. First, you had Roky's voice. It was this absolutely feral howl, just pure, raw intensity. Then you add this bizarre droning sound from an electric jug. Yeah, you heard that right, an electric jug. Throw in some fuzz-drenched guitars, lyrics about existentialism and spiritual awakening. And yeah, it was all openly fueled by LSD. Seriously, nobody had ever heard anything like it. But you know how these stories go. As the band's fame started to blow up, so did the pressure and the scrutiny from law enforcement. The very thing that made them so creative, this whole rebellious, mind-expanding vibe, well, it painted a massive target on their backs. And then, in 1969, right at the peak of their fame, it all came crashing down. Roky gets arrested. Now, you'd think it was for something huge, right? Nope. It was for possession of a single marijuana joint. A single joint. And for that, in Texas at the time, the potential penalty was, wait for it, 10 years. A decade in a state prison. Can you imagine? For a young artist already dealing with some serious mental health struggles, that thought was absolutely terrifying. So this led to just an agonizing choice, a real damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. To avoid the almost certain brutality of a Texas prison, his lawyers came up with a plan. Plead not guilty by reason of insanity. The thinking was, hey, a mental hospital has to be a safer bet, right? They could not have been more wrong. And that plea, it sent him straight to Rusk State Hospital for the criminally insane. And let's be clear, this was not a place of healing. This was a warehouse for human beings. And for Roky, it would become the site of his systematic destruction. Once he was inside Rusk, he was subjected to the so-called treatments of the era, which were just brutal. We're talking repeated, crude electroshock therapy that just shattered his memory. Heavy, heavy doses of antipsychotics like Thorazine that basically acted as a chemical straitjacket. It was a completely soul-crushing environment, and it felt like it was designed to do one thing: break him.
And the damage, it was just catastrophic. It's like the vibrant, intense, brilliant artist who walked into Rusk was completely erased. What was left was a shadow of his former self. A man with huge gaps in his memory, his personality just blunted by all the medication, that creative fire that burned so brightly, it was almost completely put out.
So when Roky was finally released in 1972, he was a fundamentally different person. But incredibly, the music, it didn't stop. It just transformed. He started channeling all of that trauma into a new and honestly terrifying sound. I mean, the change in his art was just night and day. Think about it. Before Rusk, his songs were all about consciousness, spirituality, existentialism, all this expansive stuff. After Rusk, the lyrics were filled with demons, aliens, vampires, zombies, all the monsters he'd encountered, both in his own mind and, you could argue, the ones in white coats at the institution. So this is really key. When you listen to his later stuff, songs like Two-Headed Dog or I Walked with a Zombie, you're not just hearing early horror rock. You're hearing a direct, literal translation of the torment he went through. The aliens, the demons, those were his doctors, the drugs, the electric shocks. His art became a perfect mirror of his fractured reality. And for decades, this was his life. It's this tragic paradox. He becomes this huge cult hero. His influence is everywhere. But personally, he was profoundly unwell. He often lived in absolute squalor and was just completely vulnerable to people who were happy to exploit his work and his name without giving him fair compensation. But, and this is important, the story doesn't just end there in pure tragedy, thankfully. In his later years, thanks to the absolutely tireless work of his family, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance for a fragile but real return. It started with a really powerful documentary called You're Gonna Miss Me, which laid his struggles bare for everyone to see. That spurred his younger brother, Sumner, to fight for and win legal guardianship. He finally got Roky the proper medical care and the financial stability he desperately needed. And what happened? In 2010, it led to this remarkable, acclaimed comeback album, before he sadly passed away in 2019 at the age of 71. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, Roky's story is really a powerful indictment of two massive systems that failed him. First, you have the legal system, where a tiny minor offense resulted in a life sentence of trauma. And then you have the medical system of the time, where treatment was really just a different kind of brutal punishment. You know, there's this romantic myth we all kind of buy into, the tortured artist. The idea that all that pain and suffering is what creates great art. But Roky's life, man, it's a brutal, heartbreaking rebuttal to that whole idea. His suffering didn't fuel his genius, it actively destroyed it. It came at this unbearable personal cost, and it absolutely robbed the world of the artist he could have been if he'd just been cared for. So his story leaves us with a really tough question, one we have to ask ourselves. We love and admire artists for their unique vision, especially when they're different, when they're outsiders. But what's our responsibility in all this? How do we protect that kind of brilliance, offer compassion instead of punishment, and make damn sure that a tragedy like Roky Erickson's never ever happens again?